Good morning. Today is Friday, January 31st, 2025. This morning, I will discuss some of the most inspiring details we have learned about the hostages who have been released. But this is a warning that I will also mention some of the worst abuse suffered by hostages in Gaza that we know of so far. Dr. Einat Yehene is a clinical neuropsychologist in Israel. She's the head of the rehabilitation in the health division of the Hostage Families Forum. So she is the person overseeing the rehabilitation, both physical and mental health, of the released hostages. And she has done so in previous hostage releases. And she has some serious words of warning. I've alluded to this before, but she's the expert. And she said in an interview this past week, I will not speak about their specific condition, that is the condition of any of the individuals, obviously. She's not going to talk about any individual. These are things that are not immediately visible, either physically or mentally. And she testified that she did not share in the euphoria that surrounded the release of the 4 female observer soldiers just a number of days ago. On Saturday, that's the day that those 4 were released, last Shabbos, I was troubled by the highly euphoric images. Hamas made sure to stage their release scene with the neat look, the good soldiers, the certificates, and all the cheers that filled the air. The girls showed amazing resilience, and I am happy that they played along with this game in order to survive. But she said this is a complex trauma with ongoing stress. If we look at the entire picture of the abduction from October 7th, regarding the female soldiers, we are witness to the horrifying images of their abduction, including the killing of their comrades. We now know about their prolonged captivity. It was reported that Nama spent months alone in a tunnel, and when she emerged, she did not know if she was still alive. There was a sense of detachment from reality. This is a complex trauma with ongoing stress and life-threatening danger. And she also mentioned that even the moment of their release was very difficult. And again, I'm referring to the formal staged release of last Saturday. I'm not even referring to the chaotic and dangerous scene of yesterday. But she said, just by standing on stage, there could have been a Gazan in the crowd who might have had a family member killed by the IDF the day before, and he could decide to draw a gun and shoot them. The idyllic image of their return is not the reality. This is not the truth, because we know that after the first few days, the media carnival ends, and the messages of she's still the same vibrant girl do not serve the person themselves or others and their condition. It pains me to share the next quote. Dr. Yehene has worked with released hostages from previous exchanges, and her conclusions are not at all euphoric. Here's what she said. What we know about people who spent 50 days in captivity, 50, so that means those released last November. What we know about people who spent 50 days in captivity is that none of them have ever found themselves again in this world. And of course, while we are euphoric over those who are recently returned, remember that they have suffered 470 days or more. One of those released last November after 55 days of captivity is Amit Soussana. One of those released last week is Liri Albag. Now, Soussana was released after 55 days in November 2023. She's a 40-year-old lawyer. She was taken captive from Kfar Aza. And she has been a prominent campaigner for the release of the remaining hostages from Gaza, as so many of those who were released at that time have become. But Amit Soussana is also the first released hostage to give public and direct testimony of the sexual abuse she endured at the hands of Hamas terrorists. She gave a lengthy interview this past March, lasted over 8 hours, to the New York Times, where she reviewed every single detail, and she again testified before a committee of the United Nations in November of this past year. Last week, during the past week, Soussana gave another interview on Israeli TV, and she shared more details that had not yet been previously known about her time in captivity. She said at the start of her captivity in Gaza, she was held alone. Her captor tied her up with a thick metal chain secured with a padlock. I was afraid of him, she said in this interview last week. There were many signs that it was leading toward a sexual assault. Even though I prepared myself for this, it surprised me. It was a serious sexual assault at gunpoint. And there were more. Now, listen carefully. 3 weeks after she was first taken hostage, during which, as I just mentioned, she was held alone, she was moved to a different location where there were other hostages there, including Liri Albag, who is a soldier, an Israeli soldier. She was released only last Shabbos. So Amit Soussana is giving this interview just a couple of days after Liri was released. And she's going back to her own experience in October, November, December of 2023. And she said when she was first taken, she was held alone, and then she was moved to a place where there were other women, including Liri Albag. Soussana said the violence and suffering she endured was much worse in this house, in this new place, because the guards thought that she was a soldier, because the other young women who were there were soldiers, and this woman, Amit Soussana, was older, so the guards assumed that she was not only a soldier but an officer. Suddenly they brought 2 sticks and simply tied me up while I was handcuffed by my hands and feet, like a grilled chicken hanging upside down with masking tape on my face. The terrorists then proceeded to hit her on the soles of her feet with a wooden stick, and another tried to drive a spike into her eye. At that point, now you're following the story, this is from last year. At that point, Liri Albag, who was a soldier, and they knew she was a soldier, but she was a young soldier. At that point, Liri Albag went out to speak to the guards and successfully convinced them that Soussana was not a soldier, which she was not, much less a senior official as the guards believed. The guards backed down. Listen to what Soussana said. Liri, so this is the young woman that was released last Saturday. Liri is something special. She is a force. I told her when she came back, I don't know if they would have killed me or not, but as far as I'm concerned, you saved my life. And at the end of this past week's interview, Amit Soussana said, we the hostages made a vow to each other. If one of us were ever freed, we would never stop fighting for the release of the others. Today I am fulfilling that promise by sharing my story, no matter how painful it is. Staying silent would be even harder. Allow me to add 2 other items. We spoke earlier this week about Agam Berger, and she was finally released yesterday. So she was released, and this photo was released. This is after she had been reunited with her parents, and then she's on a helicopter being taken to medical facility. So this is one of the first photos of Agam Berger, who we spoke about, after she's released. She's with her parents, and you'll see she's holding a sign. So this is her first message to the world after over 470, close to, I think, 480 days of captivity. And here's what she wrote. And you remember we spoke about her a few days ago. Here's what she wrote on this sign, her message to the people. B'derech emuna bacharti, u'b'derech emuna shavti. I chose the path of faith, right? Remember, we talked about this, how though she is not from a religious family, but she made a decision when she was held captive that she would not eat non-kosher food, that she would not cook on Shabbos. She refused to cook for the terrorists on Shabbos. B'derech emuna bacharti, I chose the path of faith. U'b'derech emuna shavti, and I return through the path of faith. Just incredible. Finally, I want to share with you something, an only in Israel moment. This is a random conversation that took place in a public park in Tel Aviv a couple of days ago. Just random conversation. It was posted on Facebook. There was a young man with his wife and their baby, and they were taking a walk in a park in Tel Aviv. 5 minutes into the walk, an elderly woman passes in front of us, her face shining with some age-old knowledge that seems to be reserved only for her. And she said to this young man, "Shalom. Hi, how are you?" And this man said back to her, "Shalom, shalom. Hi, how are you?" And this elderly woman smiled at him and said to this young man, "We came here from Kibbutz Nirim." Now, Kibbutz Nirim, you will remember, was one of the worst scenes of atrocities and destruction on October 7th. So this elderly woman is a survivor of one of the worst places on October 7th. So this is just this past week. This is in a park in Tel Aviv. So this elderly woman says to this young man, "We came here from Kibbutz Nirim. Don't ask. Don't ask." And who is this? She points to the baby. Who is this? And the young man says, "This is our baby. This is Emmanuel." And this elderly woman turns to the baby, says, "Emmanuel, Emmanuel, oh, you're so cute." And she touches his cheek. And then she stands up straight and looks at this young man and says to him, "And now tell me, how are you?" And this man says, "How am I? You survived Kibbutz Nirim on October 7th? And you want to know how I am? You're concerned about me? I'm here in Tel Aviv with my family. How am I? I'm sad." And this elderly woman turns to his wife and she hugs the young woman. And they stand in that embrace like a grandmother and granddaughter for some time. And then she turns back to this young man who says that he will be 43 in a couple of months, right? Now he's 42, he'll be 43 in a couple of months. And with tears in her eyes, this elderly woman says to this young man, who has also started to cry, she says to him, she who survived Kibbutz Nirim on October 7th, she says, "Don't cry, son. What's wrong with you? Don't cry. We will rebuild everything. We will rebuild everything from scratch. It won't work for them. Whatever they try to do to us, it won't work. It never worked. It never will work. So don't cry. You should smile. You should always smile." What a privilege to be part of a people with that kind of strength. And we should listen. We will rebuild everything. It won't work for them. It never did. It never will. And so we too, we should smile. We should smile. My friends, I wish you a great day. We're looking forward to more good news with God's help, and hopefully it will continue. Have a beautiful Shabbos, and I look forward to seeing you soon in person.